Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. Bitcoin is at a critical level right now after a major failure to the upside. And what happens next on the 4-hour chart is going to tell us exactly what we need to know about the momentum, whether we see a continued breakdown to the downside and new lows, or whether there is some support to be formed in this region that will allow the price to continue back towards 80 to 86K. Later on in the video, I will go over the higher time frame and what indications we have of this broader trend besides just here on the 4-hour time frame. And then at the end of the video, I will go over this most recent trade setup in detail if you watch to the end. If you are new to Bitcoin Escape Plan, then head over to the website bitcoinescapeplan.com and you can check out every Monday I send out a detailed analysis of the price and a few other goodies on there as well. That'll just help you kind of get a bird's eye view of what I believe is going to happen with the price each week. If you don't want to listen to all of these videos, bitcoinescapeplan.com, go check it out. All right, 4-hour chart. Really, there's only one thing that is important right now, and it's this guy right here. This is the downtrend anchored VWAP. I talk about it in every video and all my other posts. This downtrend anchored VWAP has been drawn from the 126.2K all-time high in October of 2025. So it tells us the volume and the weight of the price from that level to where we are now. As you can see, we've had multiple interactions with it over the last couple days, including candle closes right at it or right above it, right below it. Like, it is an important indicator for momentum specifically. So just to give a broad overview of how this works, there are 3 bands for it. There is the lower, the middle, and the upper band. And what we want to see when we see a reaction, so we have been below this bottom band since about January, the end of January. So typically what that means is we're going to continue to drop below it until we have an interaction with it. We had that interaction at the beginning of March. Now, once we had that interaction, we failed again. We went down to this middle band of the Elder VWAP, which is the same tool, but I have this one drawn from 2009, or actually 2011, my apologies. And then the other level for this one is, actually sometimes I have trouble seeing it. I guess it must be this one. Yes, this is the upper band of that one, which is at 95K. So basically when we see a break of the bottom band, what that means is it's going to trend towards the middle band of that one in particular. Now, since we've seen the same thing with the middle band of the Elder VWAP, the older one that I have drawn from 2011, since we saw a positive reaction to the middle, that means that the price is going to trend towards the top, which again, for that one is 95.1K. Now, I don't personally believe we're going to go to 95.1K, which I'll talk about more on the higher time frame part of the video. But I do think that there is a possibility, or rather the likelihood that we will continue to get pulled towards this price is higher. Whether or not we actually interact with it is also higher likelihood than 95.1 or 95.2. But not a guarantee still. And this one is continuing to drop. It's currently at 84.9K, which I believe is already lower than when I talked about it on Wednesday's video. So what we're seeing at the moment, so again, that's kind of, if you want to think about it as like an accordion or something, or a slinky or whatever, the more that we stretch this out, the more that we get tension on one of the bands, and then we need to, the price needs to contract towards the other band once we have confirmation of whether we're done with it or not. So we did have a significant expression above this bottom band telling us that we want to go towards the middle band, but then it immediately has retraced it. And I believe that this was partially due to FOMC news. It doesn't really matter, like the fact is it's still respecting that band. It's still indicating to us that it wants to be on the upside of that bottom band, not the bottom. It can still break below the bottom, but this break below is significantly different than this break below. And even here, when it broke it initially, it was pretty quick that it was done. It wasn't a break to the upside and failure and then break back below. So it's quite possible that we continue to see more test of this to the downside. And really it's the daily time frame that's going to tell this. And as you can see, that just started to drop right as I was saying that. So on the 4-hour time frame, really the most important thing that we want to pay attention to is a continued reaction to 70.8K. That one is very important on this time frame. Any closes below that are not very healthy for the price at this stage, especially I believe that is still above the daily SMA. I'll go over that a little bit later. But I think the daily SMA is like closer to 70.6 or 70.2. As long as we're below that, the pressure is going to be to the downside. And if we start breaking below this downtrend anchor VWAP, we are going to have a retest of the middle band of the elder VWAP, which is currently at 65.9K, which we don't want to see. We do not want to see another drop towards that in this current run. There is definitely a possibility that we are going to go to 66. It makes it hard for me to believe that that is going to react favorably to the upside, though. Like, as I'll go over later in the video is really where we see the most evidence for that. Really when I was originally talking about it, which actually I guess I can jump into that now. 4-hour chart, that's what you want to pay attention to. You want to pay attention to 69.6K, 70.8K, and we had a decent close above the previous daily daily close of 68.8. So really, as long as it stays above that, it's okay in the short term. Let's go to the higher time frames. So on the higher time frames, what I'm talking about of, this, how high is it realistically able to go? I believe that number is going lower and lower, and it's really a little bit easier to see on the weekly time frame. So the weekly time frame, as we have it here, this weekly SMA is continuing to drop. It's currently at 82.57. And by the time we interact with it, it's probably going to be closer to this 80K previous pivot that we had. The 80K pivot is super important for the 2025 lows, and I think is going to end up forming as resistance here. Originally, I had hoped it was going to be able to break towards 86, but I don't think so. And if you've been following the channel long enough, I had originally hoped we were going to have another retest of 96, but I really think we already had that. So the best case scenario that we're going to get is another failure at 80, and we may have already seen that. It remains to be seen kind of the actual momentum. I'm thinking of it primarily like this. These two pivots are super important for us to know the momentum of the price at the moment, 64K and 76.2K. We are currently just barely below the 50% mark of this range. I think that's right around 70.2K, which is a previous important daily pivot as well. If we are below that, it puts more pressure to the downside of the range. Now, there is a healthy amount of volume that has pushed us into this top side of the range, and an initial failure of that is not, a complete deal breaker. But we want to see this week close really above about 70.2. If we can see a close this week above 70.2, it's going to make it easier for us to build support and make another push for that 76.2K, which is still my base case hope at the moment. I really hope that we don't fall down to 66 here. It would not be a good sign for us to continue forward from these price levels. And we can go take a look at 2022 to see a similar example. In this particular example, very similar. So this is the 48K pivot. So technically that would be more in alignment with a failure of 96. That's why I was originally looking at it that way. But now I think it's more realistic that this is the 96K pivot. Imagine that there's another pivot here, and that's what we saw was the initial failure into, in this case, end of December. For us, this was end of January. And then we see chop, and then this would be that equivalent range. And as you can see, it does end up dropping significantly lower the range for a while. And then when it makes its initial rise higher, it's barely above that pivot point. like by a very small margin, which I think is probably what we are now going to see here, where if it even does get above that 76.2K pivot point, it's probably not going to get past 80K. So it's not looking great for Bitcoin at the moment. I know that's not really what anyone wants to hear. I'm seeing a lot of hopium still, of people talking about how the bottom is in and we're going to start rocketing from now. But I don't think that the price is really supporting that. There's very little historically that supports that thesis. And then like the more time we spend on the bottom side of this range, the more likely that we are to break to the downside. It's the more time we spend down here does not make us more likely to snap to the upside. That's not how it works. We really want to be above 70.2K when we close this week. That's going to allow us to form support there and make another attempt towards 76.2K. And even if we don't, even if that takes us the whole week, or if we punch it and end up closing right below it, that still gives us permission to rise up again. But by the time we have an interaction with that weekly SMA, I think it's going to form as resistance, not support. Just like it did back in 2022. It briefly broke above it. It was a period of 3 weeks, 2.5 really, that it was above it. And then it had a major failure and continued down. So that's our base case from 2022. Let's see how similar it was in 2018. 2018, obviously, we were above the weekly SMA for longer, so we didn't see our breakdown until around now in March, essentially. That's when we saw our significant breakdown below, and then one final rise above and a failure. But that's kind of the story of bear markets is, failed interactions with the weekly and the monthly SMA. The monthly SMA is even clearer. The monthly SMA is like we spend a long time. Where on earth did it just take the price? We spend a long time below it in those instances. And depending on the regime of who the president is, this was Donald Trump at the time, there's a possibility we rise back above it and then still break back below it. Now, this is COVID, so that's not something that we could have anticipated. But even prior to COVID, in November of 2019, it retouches the weekly SMA. And again, I don't think anybody would be upset with a cost basis of $7,200 per Bitcoin. So we don't really know if we're going to get a milder bear market or a more intense bear market. However, us already being below the monthly SMA this early is not a great indication of, strength. It is a possibility that it is an indication of a left translated cycle, which just means that we'll start rising earlier than we historically would. However, that would still be, in most people's estimation, no earlier than about October. Theoretically, if it's closer to 2018, then technically we could see it by July or August. But I wouldn't expect it to be like a significant recovery. It would be, I would imagine, another failed attempt of 96K or higher. Even if that does take way later into the year. I'm inclined to think that's not going to be the case. I don't think that if we fail here and we break down below 64K pivot, I think it's like way less likely that we're going to see a jump up to 96 after. I think if we were going to see that, we would have seen it. And realistically, if we can get a push to 80 or 86, that's going to happen now. That's not going to happen after sustained breakdown below 64. So I don't think we're in immediate pressure of being below 64 at the moment. Pretty much the same thing applies as well to the monthly as the weekly. We really want to close the month above about 70.2K. Actually, it might even be slightly different on this one. Call it 71 roughly. Let's go see evidence of the trend on the daily time frame as well. So on the daily time frame, very similar to the 4-hour and the 1-hour, we're flirting with that bottom band of the downtrend anchored VWAP. I think this is actually expressed on the weekly as well. Yes, it is. So on the weekly, we are just barely on that line. we're pretty much as low as we want to go on that line before it would be indicated as another break. And the weekly is interesting because it's still holding on to it pretty tightly. It'll go above and below it for a bit, but it's still really favoring it just because of how recent it was, being in October. So I would take that as a very important indication of momentum, is how closely is it holding on to that. And the daily tells us that it wants to rise above it, is not quite ready. We're seeing it start to consolidate a little bit, or at least lean out instead of continue to drop. However, upon zooming out, it is still dropping. I like this interaction with the daily SMA rising above it. That is one of the only things that is keeping me in my, at this point, a really terrible trade. It's like, I forget exactly where I had originally entered. I believe I tried to short somewhere in here, which would now, of course, be a really great trade. That would have been an excellent trade. And this is kind of what I'm learning with the perpetuals. Is like, you're kind of fighting against two things. You're fighting against the long-term trend or the short-term indicators of what the price is actually telling you. And what the price is actually telling you in these instances is sell. It's telling you very clearly to sell. Right now, we have no clue what the price is telling us, and we have to go based on other tools to actually indicate that momentum for us, which again, as I said, this is the downtrend anchored VWAP for us. That's going to tell us, okay, is the price significantly below that line? Well, that's not good. If it's starting to interact with it and starting to close above it, okay, cool. Well, that means it's going to head towards the next band, which is pretty much the same across time frames. It's a little bit lower on the daily than the 4 hour, 84.9K. But regardless, it's going to get pulled in that direction. I don't really give a shit if it stops at 82 or 83. I don't care. It's going to get pulled in that direction. And as you can see as well, we have this downtrend trend line from the 126 all-time high that we are also, every time we rise up toward it and fail it, that's registering as a significant failure. So I think by the time we actually have an interaction with it, it's also going to potentially be regarded as a failure of this 76.2K Fibonacci pivot. And that's pretty much, it's a little bit lower on the daily than the weekly and the monthly, but that's the same one that I just talked about on the weekly and the monthly, essentially. So if we are rejected off of that trend line, then you can forget everything I said about it going to 80 to 86. It's not going to happen. It's going to get rejected off of the 76.2K pivot as if that were 80K or 96K. Like, the price is just not going to regard those higher levels as important. And as you can see, we're already kind of struggling a little bit in this region. I think that this is the biggest indication of this, is these individuals who have an average cost basis between 86.9K and about 98.9K. You got to remember that those are people who have been holding Bitcoin for barely a year, slightly over a year in some of their cases, and they've been in significant loss for probably half or more than half of the time they've been holding. We now have to hope that those individuals end up having conviction and buying more, or at the very least, do not sell into this rise. We have no volume here. We have very, very little volume here. As you can see, there's a little bit more buy pressure in this region where we've just been, which is good, but it's so thin compared to these other points on the chart that it's the overwhelming likelihood is still that the people above start to sell out rather than this one to expand to here. It's realistic that we expand here and that we expand here into it, but then that will probably cause this to flow into these levels. This will be regarded as sell pressure until it consumes that. And that's just the reality is, and that's not even counting the people up here. People up here who are in significant loss and will be for a period of up to 5 years. I think that's what people don't realize. It's like when you buy the top, you got to wait pretty much 4 to 5 years before your money's just going to be at break even. And then it'll, never be at that price again. But, that's what we need to hope, is that all the people who bought IBIT and who wanted to put Bitcoin in their retirements and not think about it, you got to hope that those people are either not paying attention or just do not sell at that point. Or if you really want the price to be bullish, you got to hope that those people start buying, that they still have dry powder to keep buying with. So I don't think that gold and SPY have fully recovered yet. So that's also putting downside pressure on the price at the moment. But really the most important thing that I think is the interaction with this downtrend anchor VWAP. Now there's a big possibility that we go to 66, or at least where this trend line is. This is about 68.8. There's nothing really preventing us from breaking that trend line. We've already broken it multiple times. We broke below it. So, I mean, there's a possibility that we respect it this time, and that would, again, kind of be around 68 to 68.8. If we can show strength in that region, which there's a decent amount of volume there. So it's possible, that those people who bought either step up and buy more at that level, or they're just like less likely to allow the price to head lower than those levels because they've already decided psychologically, hey, this is the region where I'm seeing strength. Which, it's tough to say. Like if we need to test this bottom trend line, that puts us significantly lower. That puts us basically at 66, which is not impossible. Like if that's what we need to see here is a retest of this trend line, in which case, yeah, shorts are definitely going to be more favorable at the moment. So this interaction here with the daily SMA rising above the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP, this is kind of the only thing that's going to allow the price to continue upward, is if the daily SMA can continue rising and we don't get significant closes below it and continued drops below it, which, it's Friday. We haven't seen as much volume today as we have seen in other days of the week, and it's likely that Saturday will just kind of be choppy, or not much will happen. And that could be dangerous. That could be dangerous if the price continues to lag around that bottom band of the anchored VWAP as opposed to the daily SMA. There's nothing preventing us from just dropping below the daily SMA again. Like we've spent months below the daily SMA. So this interaction of us being above it is really the first relevant time that we've been above it since probably like September, like a long time ago, So me personally at the moment, I'm gonna have to decide at what point I'm comfortable just taking losses here or waiting for the swing to the upside. And I'm not really sure what the right answer is for that. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to lose a ton of cash here rather than, I think it's like 100 or 130 bucks worth of loss, which sucks. I mean, no doubt about it, that sucks. I definitely should have sold probably around here when I saw it was really breaking against me. And just in general, I think I really just need to listen to, like, this is where I flipped. This is where I flipped and tried to catch a long and then didn't sell out at that point. But that's a sell signal, not a buy signal. That's a sell signal, that's a sell signal, that's a sell signal, that's a sell signal. They're all sell signals. It's just a matter of being patient enough to wait for it to actually progress. And in some cases, you would have had to wait a long time. This was Sunday to Wednesday, essentially, that you would have had to wait on those entries. But most times, they do actually get reflected the way that the chart indicates that they do, specifically for the 4 hour. So that's why I'm not really panicking, because technically the same is true of these guys. Technically, that is a buy signal on a long enough time span. Now, can it be an incorrect one? Certainly. Like, these ones were all incorrect. Price is not above there. Price is not above there. Price is not above there. So you can certainly be incorrect depending on where we are in the trend. So it's not like a hard and fast rule where that's always going to be reliable. But in general, when we see a break to the bottom side, there is a movement to the upside. So me personally, I am not sure if I'm going to add more to this position, I pretty much just have enough cash to be able to sit through the overnight hours. I really honestly am just treating this first couple weeks of trading the perpetuals contracts and the futures contracts as education and tuition. And I gotta be honest with you, I think I've lost whatever, like $20 so far, $30 before if I lose this extra 100. That is so much better than trading option contracts, trading meme coins, trading most of the other vehicles that I've traded. One is like way more forgiving. So even though that doesn't sound that great, I am stoked. Like I am really pumped to find these vehicles, and it's just going to be a matter of being more disciplined about. I don't think I can stay in positions for a long time unless I have a crazy amount of cash in general, and you're only allowed to trade one direction of the trend. So I'm still leaning towards us being short-term bullish at the moment. That will be reflected again by this downtrend anchored VWAP and whether we respect these trend lines or not. I guess the only other benefit of a retest of this trend line is by the time we interact with it, it's going to be like over here at 66.4 or something like that, at least in the 4-hour time frame, maybe even higher, to be honest, depending on how quickly it breaks down there. But it should be on the mid-range or higher of 66, which puts us comfortably above the 65.8K middle band of the Elder VWAP. And that is good. That is good. We want to be above that. We want to be closing as high above that as possible, because that still gives us potential towards the upper band, which we're not going to hit. Again, we're not going to hit that, but it puts pressure towards 95.1K. So me personally, there is nothing about this that says that the price cannot continue to drop. However, typically a break to the bottom side does regard an uptrend. Now, even if it was just this, I hate you sticky keys. Even if it was just that, 2.5% trade, that I think is still better to take those scalps when they appear rather than staying in the position the whole time. The perpetuals fees are very cheap. I think it's only cost me like 53 cents or something like that. The 53 cents for the right to lose $130. But the actual benefit, I think, of these trades is the flexibility to adapt to the volatility. And again, if you have a ton of cash, it doesn't matter. You just focus on the trend. And I think in the best case scenario, you would have added long at the absolute lows and then added again when it retested it, but stayed long for the rest of the time and then just reduced contracts as was necessary. Like there would have been nothing wrong if you bought a bunch of longs here, reduced them, did nothing, added to them, reduced them, added to them, reduce them. Like you very much can stay directionally on one side, the same way that you could be doing that for shorts. There's nothing preventing someone from still holding shorts from 126, or higher. This isn't 126, this is January. But point is, like somebody, and plenty of people shorted that and are just still in that short. There's no reason for them to close that short. So I think that's the only other thing is, how reliable is your strategy is based on the higher time frames, not the lower time frames. If you're going to have a higher time frame trade, it needs to be based on a higher time frame entry. You cannot have a higher time frame trade that you take from a lower time frame entry. So again, all of these technically over a long enough period of time will be regarded as great buy signals. Just like over here, this would have been a great buy signal that was initially a take profit and significant failure for a long period of time, potentially to the point of liquidation, before then rising and going higher, obviously. So you need to look at the higher time frames in order to really be able to make educated decisions about, can I add with size and risk? That's going to be more dependent on the higher time frame, and you have to keep in context the regime that we're in. So it wasn't hard to predict that we were going to start dropping at this time, and that it's not the time yet to long it. It may be getting very close to the time to long it. Like we're starting to see the Bollinger Band snap up slightly and start to consolidate a little bit, which is better than just continuing to drop off a cliff. But even here in 2022, we saw essentially the same thing, where it started to round out and come up again for one last failure before it continued to drop down. So that is still the most likely scenario. I don't really care what anyone else says. My best case hope for my trade personally is that we can stay above this band and continue to trend higher towards the upper part of this range. Though I gotta be honest, I'm probably gonna close the second that I'm like, even if I'm in like $30 worth of loss, I'm probably gonna take that, to be honest, just in case. I forget my exact entry. I think it's like here. So it's literally above this candle at the moment. So not super stoked about that entry. It was not a good entry. And in general, I don't think I don't have a sufficient enough rule for the counter trend trade. Like I flipped it to a long here, but I was correct about that short. That short would be in a lot of profit right now if I had just left it. I just had to be in pain for a couple days. And now the argument is the same that I'm making for the circumstance I'm in now, where I'm in significant loss and I'm having to decide, at what point do I accept a significant haircut. Losing $120, $130 on an account size of $900 is a lot, but for me, this is telling me short-term bullish momentum as long as we are above that. So that's really all that matters for me at the moment. I will give an update on this on Sunday's video. Hopefully I don't have to report that I'm taking the loss, and instead it's able to come back at least. And again, even if I have to lose $30, $50, that doesn't really bother me. I just don't want to lose $130 on it. That would be unfortunate. So that's what we want to see for the weekly. Again, is ideally, we don't need to close back above this week. It's okay for us to have a bearish candle. That's okay, not the end of the world. However, we do want it to close above about 70.2K. Above about 70.2K, excellent. We have permission to make another run towards 76.2. If that is not the case, then we are just going to see a continued failure down. As you can see, we did touch this trend line on the higher time frame and closed above it. This is a good sign as long as we are above about 70.2K. So that's what you want to keep in mind, 70.3, whatever. That's what you want to keep in mind for Sunday. Sunday's video I'm going to do in the morning, so I will remind you of that, but the close won't be until after that video, and I will go over all of those key levels one more time in the newsletter on Monday, bitcoinescapeplan.com. Thank you so much. Hopefully I have better news to report shortly about that trade, but at the moment, that is a slight indication of higher, even if it is temporary. So I'm probably just going to wait, and I think that's what I like about these perpetual contracts is like you can just wait. And obviously your entry is very important and the general trend is very important, but it's not like an option contract or something where it's going to expire. They allow a level of flexibility that few things do other than spot crypto itself. And even in this instance, if you had just bought spot here, then who cares? You're in a little bit of loss, but you're not going to get liquidated. It's not a big deal, So definitely more risk when you're trading these Nano BTC perpetual contracts, but I think that there is a place for it, probably more on the higher time frame than the lower. And again, if we regard the higher time frame, then technically we are still potentially in an uptrend until proven otherwise, which again would be significant failure below about 69.5K. And really just if we continue to close below about 70.2, I don't think that is good. All right, I'll talk to you on Sunday. Have a great day.